Hi, it's Dwyer, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Keep in mind, if you are into fantasy sports, football, baseball, basketball, for the hookup for new accounts at fanduel.com, the promo code is Dwyer777. DWYER 777. Get the discount, give yourself a break. Bobby Chacon has died. Now, let me make a point here. You know, the fighters at any given time really reflect the generation they're from. Right? I was a kid in the 1970s. I can tell you the world was different in the 1970s. You had some great fighters. Look this up. Guys like Carlos Monzon, who were known to stay out late at night. Right? The people interviewing some of these fighters, you know, the fighter would be drinking, the guy interviewing the fighter would be drinking. Right? I can tell you, in New York City, I would routinely read articles about what baseball players, Mets and Yankees, were doing at New York nightclubs, Studio 54, after games. Right? Bobby Chacon was from that school of thought. Right? He was a guy who loved life. He was a guy who loved late nights. This is while the guy, simply put, was one of the best fighters on the planet. Understand, Bobby Chacon is in the Hall of Fame. I'm talking about a Hall of Fame fighter. The world's changed. People today are much more professional. They're much more serious about their craft. For example, Golovkin today is older than Marvin Hagler was when he walked away from the sport. Right? Back in the 70s, we understood that boxing was a young man's game. Today, you have professional fighters fighting well into their 40s. Right? Look at Bernard Hopkins. And he's not alone. This isn't an Archie Moore situation from the past. Vladimir Klitschko, bunch of guys are keeping themselves in shape, right? Lower body fat than, let's say, a Larry Holmes or an Ali back in the day, right? You don't have fighters out gallivanting, running the streets, so to speak, during their prime. If you look at these boxing nostalgia shows, you'll see people like Ray Leonard in his prime, right? Homeboys of his, talking about how Ray Leonard was running the streets, and Ray Leonard himself admitting in his prime that he was a guy who was out late at night enjoying himself, right? This spirit existed into the late 80s. You might have heard about Mike Tyson in a back alley fighting Mitch Green, right? Where was Mike? He was out late at night. He wasn't in Big Bear someplace training and living a Spartan existence. No, the whole point back in the day, and I know old timers know what I mean, the whole point of being a celebrity boxer was the celebrity part of the equation, right? It wasn't the boxing part. Boxing fueled Bobby Chacon's lifestyle. He just happened to be a Hall of Famer at it. Great fighter, fought the best, right? Fought Alexis Arguello, fought Cornelius Boza Edwards, right? Spectacular fighter, who also stayed out late at night. As you look at today's fighters, right, you'll see people like Floyd Mayweather, Golovkin. These guys are the consummate professionals, right? These guys, you know, I know Mayweather didn't drink, right? If these guys are out late, they're being responsible. This isn't the same as Carlos Monzon back in the day, right? There's a different ethos today. Let me make another point too. Years ago, different time, right? Bobby Chacon fought Alexis Arguello. Now, what I want people to think about is the real lives of boxers, right? Not this media portrayal, not all this bling, not, the fighter's image in interviews, right? Every fighter's bulletproof and every fighter's living the life and stuff like that. The truth is the opposite. Some of the most dominant champions in boxing today, I suspect, suffer from depression, right? Your mental health really can't be helped when, you're getting hit in the head by professional fighters for a living. So understand, Alexis Arguello, simply put, one of the best fighters I've ever seen. In fact, let me go further, right? Just in terms of being a spectacular ambassador for the sport, a role model, right? The entire time I followed boxing, I can hardly imagine a classier candidate who, of course, was a spectacular fighter than Alexis Arguello, right? Back in the day, if you were a little kid, you wanted to be Arguello. Not just for the fighter he was, but for the man he was. The guy just radiated class. It was effortless, right? Think Sean Connery as James Bond, right? It was just who the guy was. Superstar fighter, superstar guy, right? Well, let me say this. Alexis Arguello ultimately killed himself. He was suffering from depression, right? This was a guy who had it all. You would be watching a fight, other fighters would be in the arena. They would be showing you different champs, and you'd say, oh yeah. Then you'd see Alexis Arguello, and you would think, oh, Arguello. He was a star among stars. He killed himself. Well, Bobby Chacon, and understand, Arguello Chacon, that was a huge fight back in the day. That's two Hall of Famers, right? Understand, Bobby Chacon ended up with dementia. Now let's do the math. He was born in 1951. I'm just telling you, by 2000, he needed care for dementia, right? Punch drunk syndrome. Young man, not even 50. Just food for thought. He lived the last decade and a half of his life with dementia. Let's talk about Bobby's life a little bit more. Right? Did you know that Bobby's wife wanted him to quit boxing? Pleaded with him to walk away from the sport, a Hall of Fame career, mind you, right? And to move with her to Hawaii to live a normal life, right? Her goal was to have jobs for both of them. Bobby didn't listen to his wife. She committed suicide, right? I'm just telling you, fighters are living lives on the edge, right? There's a lot more mental health challenges and life challenges because of the lifestyle, right? When you get older, it's a little bit staggering because I went through a part of my life where I was wondering why, watching all these fights, I wasn't seeing certain great fighters from the past as commentators. No one was talking to people like Wilfred Benitez, great fighter, about fights at welterweight, right? I was wondering why the greats weren't being consulted, why the greats weren't even attending big time fights, right? Took me a while to then learn that folks like Wilfred Benitez were punch drunk, right? Understand, you have a lot of great fighters just vanishing from the public light because of brain damage, because the fighter has slurred speech and can't, really serve as a boxing commentator, right? And so just understand, this is a violent sport. Don't be fooled by the ongoing narrative. I'm a fan of boxing, but understand, I understand the violence. Some sports, the violence leaps out at you, right? Bullfighting. You see a guy in there with some big bull and you're thinking, my God, this guy could get killed at any time. With boxing, we're so acclimated to the violence that you start to overlook it, right? Men who get knocked out in the ring, folks, you're watching a guy with a concussion. Guys who can take punches. That's what we thought of Ali, by the way. Great chin later in his career, right? Guys who can take punches. This young man suddenly end up with slurred speech as older men, right? We all need to remember Bobby Chacon. Great fighter. Lived the life in the 70s. Was the man in the 70s. How much of his entourage was around him when he passed yesterday? Right? Every fighter. Anyone watching this video who's in the game, all I could say is, look around you right now. Right? During the good times, you're going to have a lot of people around you who aren't going to be there during the bad times. Right? Fame is fleeting. Many of the people watching this video might not even remember who Bobby Chacon was. And this was a guy who fought big names. Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Right? Arguello. Boza Edwards. Bazooka Lamone. Right? Hall of Famer. Held his own. For many, forgotten today. Right? Bobby Chacon is no longer with us. He has died within the last 24 hours. Let's shift gears. There was a great fight about to happen. Spectacular fight. Where Golovkin was going to get tested by a British boxer. I was excited when I heard about this fight. I thought, you gotta be kidding me. This is perfect. A guy who can actually get inside, who can fight low, who's going to throw a lot of uppercuts, who has a punch of his own. Right? While I thought Golovkin was going to win the fight, I thought Golovkin would have some tough moments in the fight. Who knew? Maybe Golovkin would get hit by some of this guy's uppercuts. Right? Maybe we would actually see Golovkin's chin tested by a real middleweight who has real experience at middleweight. Not sparring experience. I'm talking about real fighting experience. And you know the rest. You had a botched negotiation. Golovkin, in my opinion, just from a boxing perspective here, should have been fighting Chris Eubank. Right? Now look, I'm an old timer, so yeah, I remember Chris Eubank's father, right? You know, in my mind, I always think Chris Eubank Jr., right? Because to me, Chris Eubank is daddy, not junior, right? Well, let me just say this, right? By the way, in my mind, that's how I see the Mayweather family too, right? There's Floyd Mayweather, I'm thinking daddy, not Floyd Jr., right? Whatever I say here online, right? But let me just say this. Eubank didn't dodge Golovkin. That's a botched negotiation, right? That's a failed business deal. It wasn't about courage there, right? It was more about demands, control over ticket prices and stuff like that, right? Daddy, according to reports, is the one who blew that negotiation. I'm sure Junior would love to fight Golovkin. That fight, in my opinion, would have been far better than this Kell Brook Golovkin fight, right? A welterweight in his first fight at middleweight against a guy who, quite frankly, is on the verge of being in the Carlos Monzon class at the division, right? Golovkin really is having a spectacular career, right? Not just a Hall of Fame career. Now, this is one of those moments where you start to think, wow, how far is he going to take this? Do I not now start mentioning Golovkin as one of the best middleweights ever? Right now, there's a film out there of Kell Brook sparring with Liam Smith. Right? Okay, fair enough. I know my brothers in arms here online, Hatman, has done a great job showcasing this video. I would encourage you to Google Hatman and Liam Smith and Kell Brook, right? I know the Boxing Voice has done an extended video on the sparring tape. Here's what the sparring tape tells me, right? First, right, this is my first thought looking at the sparring tape. Canelo's in a lot of trouble. Right? Here in the States, I don't know, it's a foregone conclusion with many that Canelo's going to beat Liam Smith. Hey, I don't think that. I'll just say this. Liam Smith is a live underdog. Right? As you look at him against Kell Brook, you're going to notice that he's not flashing Amir Khan type defense. In other words, his hand's up here, right? He doesn't drop his hand and lounge around, right? Because that's a recipe for disaster against Canelo, who is one of the hardest punchers in the sport. You're going to notice, though, that he has his hands up. There's a little segment there with him and Kell Brook where he throws a 1-2. It's fast, right? Smith looks like he knows what he's doing in the ring. The challenge for him with Canelo is Canelo's shorter than him. Canelo's a withering body puncher, right? Smith's going to have to protect his body because Smith is a little bit upright. That's my first thought looking at the film. My other thought looking at the film is, wow, Kell Brook is in more trouble than I think. Right? I'll just put it this way. I'm guessing that if I'm looking at a film of a defensive wizard, right? Let's say Pernell Whitaker or Floyd Mayweather. I'm guessing his corner wouldn't be yelling, "Don't go straight back." Don't go straight back. In other words, if a fighter is about to fight some dude who you know has power, is a closer, right? If some dude is about to fight Lennox Lewis, right, and that dude is new to the division, and I'm looking at a sparring video that they've obviously made public because it's supposed to show us something, and the challenger's cornerman is saying, "Don't go straight back. Don't go straight back." And I know what going straight back leads to against a Lennox Lewis. That's not encouraging to me. Right? As you look at the Liam Smith, Kell Brook tape, you're going to hear Kell Brook's corner saying, "Don't go straight back. Don't go straight back." Understand, Kell Brook hasn't been in a fight against a guy with the kind of long-range power that Golovkin has, right? What that little passage tells you is that at this stage of his career with more than 30 fights, right, Kell Brook really isn't a guy who thinks about being hit as he backs away from a guy with long-range power. Anyone here who's followed Golovkin's career knows that's who Golovkin is. Right? Let me say this too. on the film, and it's interesting. Understand, Liam Smith is an absolute killer on his front foot. But you're going to notice Liam Smith is backing up at times, right? Liam Smith is taking it as a sparring session, right? He's in there trying to sharpen certain skills in advance of his fight. And he understands against a Canelo, he's going to have to back away at times, right? He can't be living in the pocket, then taking shots to the body and stuff like that. Okay, fair enough. So you see Liam Smith backing away. Let me say this. Understand, to everyone analyzing that Canelo fight, that shows you Liam Smith is not James Kirkland. Right? Liam Smith understands he needs some negative energy in his game. He can't be always on his front foot against Canelo. So he's in there backing up against Kell Brook. What I want people to notice, though, is Kell Brook coming forward. Let's just say he doesn't look like Andre Ward coming forward. Right? There's an extra step. You know the guys who fight inside very well. There's an extra step they're able to take where they can lean on you. Literally, come inside, get to mid-range, and then continue forward. Right? So they're right up on you. Mike Tyson. Right? It's the extra step that's needed against Golovkin because, in my opinion, you understand that at long range, Golovkin has long range power. He can knock you out from halfway across the ring. Right? So you need to make the fight sloppy. You need to get inside on him. You need to be leaning on him. The fight has to have some clinching involved. Right? You need to be so close to him that the guy thinks you're his deodorant. Right? I mean, up on him. You know those fights. I don't see that. I don't see that. In the Sparring film, and it's a short film, between Kell Brook and Liam Smith. Right? I just don't see that. You know who can fight inside well? Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Right? He's a guy who could come up and smother you inside. Use his body, use his, physicality to impose himself on you. I don't see Kell Brook doing that. What I see is a video of his corner saying, don't go straight back, don't go straight back. I'll tell you what. You and I know that by the time he steps in the ring against Golovkin, that better be second nature. That better be second nature. Because one mistake, he goes straight back after coming forward. One mistake could result in the usual Golovkin finish, which is Golovkin by KO. Right? So, as I've said in earlier videos, while I respect Kell Brook, I have the utmost respect for Kell Brook in taking this fight. While I love the boxing history lesson Kell Brook is giving us, right, in interviews, he's pointed out that Ray Leonard, moved up in weight to fight Marvin Hagler. He's pointed out that Ray Robinson moved up in weight to fight Joey Maxim. Great. Right? What I want people to consider, just food for thought here, is that Ray Leonard had several years to prepare for Hagler. Several years. This fight, think about it. This fight involves the Golovkin people trying to get a deal with Chris Eubank. That deal falling apart. Then Kell Brook coming in, last minute replacement. Right? How much preparation does Kell Brook have? I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same as the level of mental preparation that Ray Leonard had. Understand, Ray Leonard and Hagler talked about having a fight for years before the fight actually took place. Right? It was kind of like the Manny Pacquiao-Floyd Mayweather fight. Right? Leonard had health problems, had to retire from the sport. Leonard had a detached retina. Then Leonard decided to come back. He comes back to fight Marvin Hagler. Right? Now, if Kell Brook privately has been targeting a guy who's 2 weight classes up for years and has been thinking about a blueprint on what he would do against that guy, why would his corner in a sparring session against Liam Smith be imploring him not to go straight back not to go straight back after engaging, right? Literally the wrong strategy against a guy like Golovkin, right? This is about as reassuring as me watching a sparring session of some future opponent against Vladimir Klitschko. And that opponent's corner is yelling at him repeatedly, hey, don't go straight back. You know, if I'm a gambler, I'm going to be looking at that film and I'm going to be thinking, this isn't really reassuring. How ready for Vladimir Klitschko is this guy? Well, let me ask you, is there a better guy in boxing at catching a guy who falls asleep defensively an arm's length away from him than Golovkin? Right? Let's just say the list has hardly anyone on it. I got the feeling that Liam Smith was more prepared for Canelo, looking at the sparring of Liam Smith and Kell Brook, than Kell Brook is for Golovkin's style. So, let me sum up. The wrong Englishman, in my opinion, is fighting Golovkin. Right? It should have been Chris Eubank. Styles make fights. Eubank comes in low. Eubank's throwing an uppercut. I don't know if Golovkin knows how to block uppercuts. I haven't seen a guy with the audacity to come in low with the power of Eubank against Golovkin, right? Kasim Uma comes in low. Roughs up Golovkin for a few rounds, but Uma was a volume guy. He wasn't a punching power guy, which is who Chris Eubank is. Right here, I'm not even sure if Kell Brook's punch translates at middleweight. Let me say this too about Ray Robinson, and it needs to be said. You know, understand Ray Robinson is one of the most gifted offensive fighters in boxing history. Right? I would encourage people to look at his fight. Now keep in mind, he got roughed up by this guy. He lost fights to this guy, who's a boxing Hall of Famer. But there's a fight of Ray Robinson against Gene Fullmer, where Ray Robinson, backing up, drops Fullmer on one punch. Right? Ray Robinson was a merciless puncher. Randy Turpin beats Ray Robinson. Right? Beats him. In the rematch, it's a close rematch. Right? I think history's misconstrued the rematch. Randy Turpin could well have won the rematch. I'm just telling you, Ray Robinson, one punch, right, had that kind of power. Hits Randy Turpin, the world changes. Right now, Kell Brook definitely has a punch at welter. Definitely has a punch at welter. Are you sure he has a punch at middleweight? Keep in mind, Golovkin has never been knocked down. Forget knocked out. He's never been knocked down professionally. He's a middleweight with a chin. Are you sure Kell Brook, who's mentioned Ray Robinson in talking to the press, are you sure Kell Brook has the tools that Ray Robinson had? Sure, a guy with a huge punch can move up. Right? Huge punch. Outsized punch. Right? I don't have a doubt about Canelo's power at middleweight. I have doubts about Kell Brook's power. So, for me, personally, with all due respect to all these people here online who are breaking down this Liam Smith, Kell Brook sparring session film, that sparring film doesn't tell me that Kell Brook is going to beat Golovkin. That sparring session doesn't tell me that Kell Brook is ready for Golovkin, right? I don't see Kell Brook showing the kind of defense that I would say, oh, Golovkin's going to have a problem. I don't see Kell Brook, who looks like he wants to fight mid-range, leaning a shoulder on Liam Smith, right? And actually fighting the kind of sloppy, up-in-your-face type of fight, a Roberto Duran fight, that in my opinion it would take, a Chris Eubank fight, that in my opinion it would take to seriously challenge Golovkin. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. If you want to talk about Bobby Chacon, boxing in the 1970s, guys in the 70s who stayed out late at night, trust me, there are many of them, right? In the 60s, we're hearing Sonny Liston was in casinos before fights. Then I hope you leave those comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.